Tonight on 2020, the handsome policeman who loved women too much,
I can't change that. That's who I was.
suddenly accused of betraying his own young children.
Show me what Ray did.
These were the most graphic, violent, severe allegations.
But what did they do to their father?
You wanted to commit suicide.
A case full of secrets, a dusty videotape hidden in a garage, and a grown son's surprising admission.
I remember everything else detailed.
Were his children really victims?
Something happened.
Or did one ex-wife go too far?
It sure looks like it.
Will the truth hurt?
If someone plants the smallest little thing in your mind, you can take it and run with it.
See what's next.
There was something really rotten at the heart of this case.
Here now, Elizabeth Vargas.
Good evening. Chris Cuomo is off tonight. What could be worse than facing life in prison for something you insist you didn't do? Well, much worse is knowing that your own children put you there. Tonight, a father, a decorated police officer, accused of a heinous crime. But did he do it? And if not, did someone put his children up to telling a lie?
In the early 1980s, the country moved to a disco beat. In Vancouver, Washington, motorcycle patrolman Ray Spencer had some moves of his own. He was a young officer with a wife and 2 children to protect. But the movie star handsome police officer also had something else, a reputation.
He was an arrogant, macho womanizer. Nobody really liked him because he was such a jerk when he was a police officer.
Ray's weakness was blonde women, fully figured blonde women.
It was a weakness Ray indulged and his wife Deanne painfully endured.
There were many times that there were other women.
I liked women, and I can't change that. That's who I was.
Would you have called yourself a womanizer?
Yes, I would.
Were you a good husband?
I felt I was. And I mean, other than that, I mean,
It's a pretty big that.
It is a big thing, yeah. Deanne had decided that she'd had enough.
It's not so much the rage and anger that I had, but I don't believe anything that was ever said to me was the truth.
They divorced in 1981, and Deanne took the children, 5-year-old Matt and 2-year-old Katie, and headed south to Sacramento, leaving Ray behind in Clark County. It was hard on both the children and Ray, who may have struck out as a husband but hit a home run as a dad.
I always wanted to be the father, but I never had. They were my world.
Decades later, Matt and Katie still remember how much they missed the early days of fun with their father.
I remember fishing, and I remember picking blackberries. Just kind of happy things that we did.
What about you, Matt?
I mean, he taught me how to fish, he taught me how to shoot. It was like we were just about to get to that point where we were going to really bond as father and son, and then all of a sudden it was just gone.
The time with their dad became severely limited.
6 weeks in the summer, 1 week every other Christmas. That was a difficult time for me.
Ray says he put a good front on for the kids, but turned for solace where he always had, to women. In 1983, 2 years after his divorce, Ray married Shirley Hansen. Shirley had a 3-year-old son of her own, nicknamed Little Matt. She was familiar with the signals children send out, and on one visit, Ray's daughter Katie gave her an alarming one, suggesting she was being inappropriately fondled.
What Katie had said was, Daddy does it to her. Now, my assumption was Daddy was a boyfriend that the children's mother was hooked up with.
5-year-olds don't all of a sudden say, somebody's touching me in my private parts.
Mm-hmm. I called the Sheriff's Department in Clark County, also called the Sacramento County Sheriff's and Child Protective Services in California.
California authorities dropped the case after investigating and finding no evidence of abuse. But it was a different story in Clark County, Washington. Authorities there dug in and Ray's children were repeatedly interrogated by Detective Sharon Krause.
Do you remember the first time police came and questioned you about any inappropriate behavior toward you?
I don't remember that first time. So.
And it felt like a couple months. I'm not sure the exact timeline, but it was definitely a little while they had with the same questioning.
8-year-old Matt denied any abuse, but ultimately 5-year-old Katie gave up tales of being repeatedly raped. More shocking than that, she said the man who did it was her own father, Ray.
Who actually said to you, we're investigating you, you are the target?
Right. Sergeant Davidson and Detective Sharon Krause from the Clark County Sheriff's Department.
What was your reaction?
I said, you must be crazy. I said, I'm the one who reported this. Well, you know, you're the suspect in this.
In January of 1985, less than a year after he'd first notified authorities, Ray Spencer was charged with one of the most vile crimes imaginable, raping his own daughter.
You know, at that point, I could step out of my life and watch it spiral out of control.
The once cocky motorcycle cop was fired from his job, separated from his second wife Shirley Spencer, and reduced to living in this motel, which became the scene of the next shock in the downward drama. After they separated, Shirley Spencer asked if her son Little Matt could spend a night with Ray at the motel. Ray agreed, and days later he was arrested and charged with raping Little Matt.
And I'm thinking, this just can't be happening.
Then the final blow. After 8 months of denying he'd been abused, Ray's son Matt said his father did the same thing to him. Now 3 children had accused Ray.
You know, I was starting at that point to question my own insanity.
You wanted to commit suicide?
Yeah. I spent about 2 weeks in Oregon Health Science University Hospital, their psych ward, diagnosed with severe clinical depression.
Do you think you were that depressed because nobody believed you were innocent, or because you were worried perhaps what they're saying is true?
How many accusations does it take before you begin to believe you are a monster? Ray reached the point where he wondered if he had suppressed memories of committing these horrible acts.
That made it even tougher, because then I'm thinking, you know, if you did this to your own children, you know, you deserve to be locked away.
As the trial date approached, Ray Spencer agreed to be injected with the truth serum and to undergo hypnosis. What he remembered and the new set of shocks that followed, next. It's hard to even imagine what it must be like to be charged with repeatedly and violently raping your own children. Accused of doing just that, former policeman Ray Spencer had come to believe it might be true. Desperate to see if he somehow had suppressed memories of committing these awful crimes, he underwent hypnosis in the spring of 1985 and was injected with truth serum.
They took me so deep that they put me into a self-induced coma. And the findings from the doctors said, I can't find anything here that would lead me to believe that these charges are factual.
For Ray, the doctor's conclusions cleared his mind of any doubt that he was innocent. But it didn't wash with prosecutors in Clark County, Washington, who remained convinced that Ray was guilty of repeated and horrendous sexual assaults. The prosecutor there is now John Fairgrieve.
His 2 children, 8 and 5, made allegations of sexual abuse, sexual intercourse against him. His 5-year-old stepson did as well.
With these kinds of cases, when you start having multiple victims, they become very hard to defend.
Peter Camille is a defense lawyer who reviewed the early stages of the case.
Ray entered what's known as an Alford plea that lets you plead guilty without admitting guilt.
Ray did that knowing a court battle pitting his word against 3 children was a fight he was almost certain to lose, and one for which he didn't have the stamina.
It's 3 days before trial, and I'm saying, I can't go any further. I just cannot, I don't have the strength.
Ray says that with his head clouded by medication for depression and his heart knowing he was innocent, he entered that Alford plea on 11 felony counts. Not admitting guilt cost him dearly with the sentencing judge.
Judge Lodge told him, those that don't admit with this kind of a crime get the maximum. And that's what he gave Ray. He gave him every day he could give him. Multiple life sentences plus 14 years. There wasn't one more day he could have thrown on.
Were you coherent enough even through the medication to understand how long you were going to spend behind bars?
Suddenly it occurred to me what that judge had just said, and my knees gave out and the guards had to hold me up.
Ray was sent to the maximum security Washington State Correction Center. He knew he'd be doing hard time for a long time and feared he'd likely die there. His children, whose accusations had sent him to prison, had no idea where he was.
Did you ever, because your children, did you ever say, well, when are we going to see Dad again? I mean, did you fully grasp what was going on?
No, we didn't understand the magnitude of these charges. We had no idea that our father was going to be taken away because we were just getting news through our mom.
I just would pretty much focus on the fact that, you know, he needs to get some help and he needs to get healthy.
It was positioned like that. I mean, he's sick.
He's
he needs
sick.
Some help.
That's what we
so
heard.
We went, okay.
Ray was really in a place that was less about help than survival. When word got out he was a former police officer, he was transferred for his own protection to a prison in Idaho. But the change in prisons didn't alter what Ray says was the hardest thing for him. He was forbidden to communicate with his children.
You know, I mean, it's very difficult because you wonder about all those first. Sorry. You know, the first baseball game, the first date, graduation.
He said, I would sit in that prison cell and I would wonder if Matt and Katie ever thought about me.
And we did. We did a lot. We talked about it, and it got to the point where we realized, after a couple years, I'd say, that we're not going to see him again.
He wasn't coming back.
As they got older, Matt and Katie understood where Ray was and thought he was gone from their lives forever.
I think my teenage years is where I really started to miss the things that, you know, all my friends had their fathers doing with them, and, you know, so it really sunk in, I think, at that time.
Ironically, Ray may have been able to reconnect with his children and shorten his time in prison if he had not kept insisting he was innocent of abusing them. As a result, he was repeatedly denied even consideration for parole.
At some point, didn't you want to try and just say, okay, I'll say whatever it is you want me to say, just get me out of here?
I didn't do it, and I wasn't going to admit it.
You never wavered?
No. No.
With his future bleak and uncertain, Ray says his thoughts often drifted to the past, to memories of a faraway place and a woman named Norma. She would wind up saving his life. Norma had been a nurse on the Pacific island of Guam, where in his early 20s, Ray was a military air traffic controller.
Norma was the only woman I ever truly loved. And I felt compelled to just tell her that.
He took a gamble and wrote to her from prison saying, I neither know whether this will reach you